This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a highly popular and respected actor, director, and producer whose portrayal of the smooth-talking Eric Stratton, better known as Otter, in the blockbuster movie National Lampoon's Animal House made him a household name. Some of his other movie credits include Divorce American Style, Yours, Mine, and Ours, How to Commit Marriage, Magnum Force, Almost Summer, 1941, To Be or Not to Be, Fletch, A Very Brady Sequel, Van Wilder, and the Etruscan Smile, for which he and his fellow cast members were named Best Ensemble Cast at the Boston Film Festival. And on television, he's brought us numerous memorable characters, including Jim Horn on The Virginian, Griff King on Bonanza, Quentin Beaudine in The Quest, Dr. Brick Breeland in Hart of Dixie, Doc Mullins in Virgin River, and of course, Vice President John Hoynes on the highly acclaimed TV series The West Wing, for which he received 2 Emmy Award nominations for Outstanding Guest Actor in a Drama Series. He's appeared in hundreds of TV shows going all the way back to Leave It to Beaver, My Three Sons, Here's Lucy, Ironside, as well as Rhoda, Hawaii Five-0, Sybil, Without a Trace, Entourage, Burn Notice, CSI, Madam Secretary, This Is Us, and dozens more. And you've seen him in a whole slew of TV movies and miniseries. Some of my favorites are Blind Justice, The Littlest Victims, Little White Lies, Buried Alive, The Legend of Calamity Jane, Jackie Bouvier Kennedy Onassis, Martha Inc., The Story of Martha Stewart, Judas, and Killing Reagan, for which he was nominated for Best Actor at the Critics' Choice Television Awards. And over the years, our guest has also directed many TV shows and TV movies. In fact, he directed the pilot episodes for The Good Guys and Covert Affairs. And now he's released a highly compelling and insightful memoir entitled Damn Glad to Meet You, My 7 Decades in the Hollywood Trenches, in which he shares his remarkable life journey, taking us behind the scenes of his iconic career. I'm delighted to welcome the incomparable Tim Matheson to our show. Tim, thank you so much for being here.
Harvey, it's nice to be here. Thank you for your welcome. I appreciate that.
You started acting professionally when you were 12 years old, and although you wanted to be successful, you've said your main motivation to be an actor as a child was to make money to help your mother make ends meet after your parents broke up. You never considered yourself a star as a child. Do you think that in some ways, Tim, that was a good thing?
Oh, I think I was lucky not to be the star of a show because I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, it was, I could handle a couple of lines here and a couple of lines there. And with a good director, I thought, I could handle it. But to get into the more emotional parts where the character demanded to be open emotionally, and I did not know how to approach that. I discovered a way early on that worked for me, and then I forgot about it for a few years, and then when I was studying it, I fell upon it again, and it was listening to music. Well, I was doing this first show called Window on Main Street with Robert Young, and right after Father Knows Best, and Camelot was a big, huge hit with Richard Burton and Julie Andrews on Broadway, and the album, everybody had that music from Camelot, and we listened to it in our house. And one day I was studying for an emotional scene in Window on Main Street when I'd been added as a regular cast member mid-season, and I just broke. It really made me emotional because it reminded me of the tragic breakup of my own family and my father moving out, and so that was a technique that I found then on my own that worked for me, because I would just listen in my head to that music when I was doing a scene or getting ready for a scene, and the emotion would just be there. And so that was a technique that I discovered, yes.
I want to read you something you wrote about your childhood. You said, Every day seemed to bring new arguments, new tears. I never had any idea what tomorrow would bring for me or my family. My question to you, Tim, is this: how do you think your difficult home life impacted your acting abilities as a child?
I think that's why I became an, I mean, the I used to just go hide from it, you know. I didn't have any, I think my parents were both kind of heavy drinkers. And I think when you grow up in an atmosphere like that, you keep going, everything's fine. No, it's all fine. You don't call attention to it. And I remember once they were arguing in I was in the first grade and they were arguing in the other room, kind of angrily yelling at each other. And I said, Mom, Dad, and because I wanted to say, please stop it. And I said, Mom, Dad, and they stopped arguing and they said, what? And I said, I couldn't bring myself to say it. I said, what time is it? And I just couldn't ever really bring myself to say what I felt. And so I would just go hide in the movies and spend all day Saturday at the serials and the kid movies. And then I'd stick around in the evening for the adult movies. And then on Sundays, I'd go back and spend another 4 to 6 hours watching those movies, because in those movies, there was generally a happy ending. It was everything the same way every time. And my life was chaos, it felt to me like. So I felt safe and comforted when I went to the movies. And that's sort of where it began for me. I think that's what drove me to the safety of the movies.
Well, one of the reasons your book resonated with me so much, I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a retired family and criminal court judge. And
No.
every single child that I interviewed, and sometimes we did have to interview children, when I would ask them, what would you like to happen in your life? They either said, I'd like my parents to get back together, or I'd like my parents to stop fighting. And
Yeah.
your book really touched my heart. We've had a lot of former child stars on our show, and they've all talked about the difficult working environment and the various degrees of disrespect and sometimes even abuse that child actors can be subjected to on the set. When would you say you learned to stand up for yourself and demand to be treated with respect as an actor?
I was lucky. I wasn't disrespected or treated too badly, but I do remember on a couple of shows where I didn't do a good job. And I remember the director saying to me when it was done, he said, well, maybe next time we'll give you a smaller part. And I was like, it hurt me so much that when I got home, I called him up and I said, you really shouldn't talk to people like that. That was very hurtful. And if you had wanted something from me, you should have directed me more and you should have talked to me more about it in the moment and helped me to give you a better performance, because I didn't know. And he apologized to me, and I sort of learned then to start standing up for myself. But it was hard. That was hard for me, and I think I did allow certain people to stay in my life that weren't really rooting for me and were really kind of constantly, digging at me and putting me down. And it took me a long time to learn that lesson, that wasn't really what you wanted around you.
Yeah, one of the things that made me love your book so much is that I wanted to give you a big hug about 8 times.
Oh,
Now, of course, I have to ask you about working with the legendary Lucille Ball and Henry Fonda in Yours, Mine, and Ours. Was one of my favorite movies as a kid. You were 17 years old. We recently had Morgan Brittany on our show. She played
oh my
Henry
God.
Fonda's oldest daughter. She raved about Henry Fonda's kindness and generosity, and she said Lucy treated all of the kids like they were adults. Was that your experience?
Totally. I mean, Lucy was a mentor to me. She took me aside and counseled me about her career and about asking me questions about my career, gave me advice between scenes. She'd invite me into her dressing room, and while she was getting made up, she'd talk and she said one time, if you want to be a star, you got to act like a star. And I think what I didn't quite know what that meant. I didn't know if that meant temperament wise or what, but I think what she meant was, if you act like a star if you're prepared, if you deliver the goods, you can be a star. And I think that's what I took away from it.
You know,
But
I asked Lucy Arnaz, who's become a friend of mine. She was on our show a few years ago. I asked her what she thought her mother meant by that after I read your book. And Lucy Arnaz said that she was telling you to treat yourself like a successful actor and a skilled performer and a pro. And then others in the industry will see you that way if that's how you conduct yourself. And I think you got that message.
that's wise. Yes, that's so wise. I mean, yeah, because it's if you want respect, you have to ask for respect, and you have to demand it, and you have to deliver. And
you have to earn it.
Yeah, yeah, it's not, yeah.
Well, for all of those Lucy fans out there, I want to mention that Tim appeared in an episode of season 4 of Here's Lucy called Kim Moves Out. Was Lucy different on the set of her TV show than she was on the movie set?
She was no. I got there day one. I'm shy. I'm a very shy kid, and now I'm 20 or 19, and it's in front of an audience, and that makes me nervous, and Lucy's makes me nervous, and so like day one of rehearsal, and the wonderful Gail Gordon, who was a great character actor and comedy actor from Armis Brooks and other shows, was a co-star of the show, and in the first rehearsal, Lucy, she wasn't even talking to me. She yells to the director, "Tell him to speak up. I can't hear him." And I was like, oh God. And she's talking about me. And it was like, oh God. And Gail took me aside and he said, "Tim, don't worry about it. Lucy's like that with everybody." She yelled at Richard Burton last week to speak up when he and Liz were here doing an episode. And he was just making me feel better. But one of the things that I took from that episode was Lucy was very generous to people she had grown up with and who'd worked with her in vaudeville and perhaps weren't as successful, obviously, as she was now. So she would give them a day part or a small part, or she would make sure that they stayed busy and also got their health insurance covered. And there was this actress, and Gail Gordon, myself, and Lucy are backstage behind the set, and the audience is out front and the set's out front. And we're back there, and this young woman, this woman who was Lucy's friend, who she's given this job to, was getting ready to make an entrance. And Lucy looked at me and Gail and said, $20, she blows her line. And I was like, oh my God, that's so rough. Oh my God, that's the woman. Anyway, she makes her entrance. She goes out there. She closes the door. She has her little scene. She says her line. She gets her laugh. She makes her exit. She comes back outside, sticks her hand out to Lucy, and they both laugh. And I'm sure Lucy gave her $20 later. But what I got from that, and I was just this sweet, innocent little kid, but what I got was later on, it's a full contact business. Show business is a full contact sport, and you got to be tough. And athletes are the ones who they'll say the worst things to each other. I mean, baseball players, golfers, I mean, they constantly dig it at each other to try and, and they're steeling themselves up, because if I can make you upset, if I can say something that throws you off your game, I'll win. I can beat you. So that's one of the things about sports. And I think that was the thing about vaudeville. You're doing 8 shows a week. I want your spot. I want to move up in the show to the key spot. And if I can throw you off, I can get that spot. So I think that was the lesson I took from that and Lucy. And the woman, she didn't mind that. She was tough. She had been through 50 years of this business. So that was the big lesson I got from Lucy, that, you got to steel yourself.
When you think about the fact that the stars of your first 3 movies were Lucille Ball, Henry Fonda, Bob Hope, Jackie Gleason, Debbie Reynolds, Dick Van Dyke, were you ever so starstruck as a kid that you found it difficult to concentrate on the acting?
No, well, sometimes with Lucy, but she demanded that everyone perform to her level. Whether you were 6 or 60, you had to do what you had to deliver. You had to know your lines. You had to bring it, and she had been there when I tested for the part. and she had supported me and encouraged me. And what I didn't realize is Lucy Arnaz had tested for the part of her oldest daughter, and Jennifer Leake, who I ultimately married for a very short time, got the job and was probably a better match. And I think Lucy's test is online. I saw it somewhere, and she's very good, but she's just not, exactly what Lucy wanted. And I thought it was a testament to who Lucille Ball was, that she didn't pick her own daughter to do that part. She picked another actor who fit the part better, I think.
And did any of those other stars I mentioned ever make you starstruck?
Jackie, I think Jackie, I was a huge Jackie Gleason fan. I mean, the Honeymooners is legendary. It's the gold standard of comedy, because here's this pretty awful guy. He's a pretty rough around the edges guy. He threatens his wife, he to the moon, Alice, I mean, but he has such a good heart. And he berates his friend, Art Carter Norton, Ed Norton. And it's a testament to how big a heart he had, that he made that work. I think.
Well, in your book, you describe Jackie Gleason as a supernova.
Yes. Yes.
What a great description.
Well, thank you. He was in the movie for 3 weeks, and the way Gleason was, he said, "What's the most money any actor's gotten for a 3-week part? I want $1 more." If you want to be a star, you got to act like a star. But he also, there was a moment where he and I he was my father, and I played his son, and we're in a scene with a bunch of other actors, none of whom have any experience. 4 or 5 of them are band members who've never acted, and then the young actress, Joanna Cameron, who was new. She was an inexperienced actor at that point. So after once the director rehearsed the scene, Gleason takes me aside. He says, "Kid," said, "you and I are the only ones who know what we're doing. So let's just do this scene and get out of here." And I just went, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Gleason."
That's quite a compliment. And another cinematic legend you got to work with was Joan Crawford when she guest starred in The Virginian. Can you share any memories of working with Miss Crawford?
Not so nice. Joan was, I could see where no more wire coat hangers came from. I mean, she was very nervous, and she'd been around. I mean, she'd probably started in vaudeville too, and had gone through numerous segments of her career where she was a song and dance person, a big movie star, and then she was a film noir star, and she transitioned through numerous ups and downs of a career. And then I think she just wanted to work. She liked The Virginian, but I didn't really have very many scenes with her. But in one scene, I'm sitting at her feet looking up, and she's talking, and there's another couple of kids around, and she's talking to a couple of the actors in the show. And after the rehearsal, she said to the director, "Tell this kid not to look at me." And I was like, "Oh my God, why? What did I didn't even have a line or anything. I just for whatever reason, it annoyed her, it bothered her, it distracted her, but she was tough, and she kept the set at 55 degrees so she wouldn't sweat, and we were all running around in parkas because it was ice cold. We never had the set that cold. But it was the other side. I mean, Debbie Reynolds and Dick Van Dyke and Lucy was tough, but lovely off stage. Henry Fonda was, one of the most gentle, wonderful, caring human beings I've ever experienced, and in those days, actors always stayed on the set. You sat in your chair and you waited between takes. Now everybody runs off and does phone calls and podcasts and whatever they do. They go into their trailer and don't come out until they're called. So you don't fraternize and hang out with your other actors. But in those days you did. And Henry was trying to quit smoking, so he was doing needlepoint between takes. He was just keeping his hands busy. And I think he did quit. And he was lovely. And when he got up and acted, he just got very still and very real and simple and honest. And it was and perfect. And it was just another lesson and another way to present it. He didn't try to be Lucy. He didn't try to be funny. He knew what the author wanted him to do, and he was this wonderful male figure. And he had, he had some funny scenes, but basically the wide comedy, the broad comedy, that's Lucy.
Well, in 1973, you appeared in Magnum Force, which was the second Dirty Harry movie starring Clint Eastwood. You played Officer Phil Sweet. As an actor, you described Clint Eastwood as totally real, relaxed, and in the moment. And he didn't believe in over-rehearsing because he wanted the dialogue to sound fresh and raw. Now, I know you were taught by Lucy to rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. So which method do you prefer?
I think for comedy, for certain style of film and theater, if you're doing physical comedy, if you're doing Howard Hawksian rapid fire, the West Wing, you had better rehearse that a bunch of times, because you need to have the pace. You need to know that you pick up the drink on this line, and you smoke your cigarette on that line, and you punch the typewriter on this line. You have to know all those things to do it as if it's for the first time. Whereas with Clint, I think for him, and I guarantee he rehearses on his own. He knows his dialogue cold. I think he just means the first time you do it with the other actors in the set, in the moment, it's usually better the first few times you do it. And that's why he doesn't do many takes, because things get too manicured, they get too professional, too smooth, too just and you look at Howard Hawks, and you look at like Cary Grant and his girl Friday with Rosalind Russell, they're overlapping each other, they're talking, and and it's like life. And Howard Hawks would always give directions. He says, "That's perfect, do it again, twice as fast." It's just the way things, you get that kind of real life thing.
Yeah, for sure. Now, in 1972, you joined the cast of Bonanza in season 14, which turned out to be the final season. You played Griff King, essentially replacing Dan Blocker after he passed away suddenly. Can you tell us about the atmosphere on the set on the day that you learned the show was canceled?
Yeah, it was such a family. It was where I learned a lot of lessons. I was studying acting. I was thinking of myself as a method actor. I was wanted to be referred to by my character's name, and these guys had all been together for 14 years, and they'd lost their blood brother, Dan Blocker, the year before, and so there was a huge hole in the middle of it, and it was a dear thing for them. They had done that most of their careers, and my character didn't fit in, so I didn't mind that I didn't fit in. I kind of was methoding that. And on the last day, it was a sequence of a show that I was the lead character in, and I was working with a woman named Karen Carlson, who was married to David Soul, and she and I were playing a fictitious married couple that were working for the government to try and capture some Civil War villains, criminals. And when we finished the last scene that was of the episode, and the episode's now done, I noticed there was a camera crew from the local NBC station here. Michael walked on the stage and he said, "I'm so sorry, I have an announcement to make to everyone." And they were rolling the camera for the newsreel. NBC just called, and this is the last scene that will ever be done for Bonanza. This is the end of the show after 14 years. And it was out of nowhere. We still had another 8 episodes we were supposed to do. And it was just a horrible shock. But true to who he was and to try and lighten the mood, Landon was standing in the door of the set, and he said, "Not only is this the end of Bonanza, but it's also the end of Little Joe. And then a prop guy sticks a shotgun in front of the lens, pulls the trigger, kaboom, and then the stunt guys are behind Landon and they jerk him out of the doorway like he's been hit by a shotgun. And that was it, you know. And so he ended with a bang and with a laugh. And as only Michael could do. He was one of the smartest, sweetest, most wonderful men. And fortunately, he forgave me my sins while I was on the show eventually. And so I was pleased about that because he was a supremely talented and wonderful, wonderful man and a wonderful director and writer.
Now, for those of our viewers who are wondering what sins Tim committed, you got to read the book, because there was a particular comment made in an interview that did not please Mr. Landon, but we'll leave it at that. I was very intrigued, Tim, by a comment you made about working with Kurt Russell on a TV series called The Quest. You said that working with Kurt Russell was a master class in teamwork and partnership. What made that working relationship so special?
Well, Kurt had been around, as the Cowboys say, he'd been around since Water. You know, he was a kid star. He had starred in movies. His father was a character actor. You know, Bing Russell was a former baseball player and an actor. And I acted with him in the Virginian and Bonanza. And he was a great guy, Bing. And so Kurt brought this sports kind of ethic to acting. And so I was on his team. And so I took care of him and he took care of me. And he was smart about acting. He was very smart about acting. He'd done so much of it. When I was in my method, at the end of my method thing, and I was like the first rehearsal, I would start to dig into the character and then try this and the emotions and you know, your first rehearsal, you're going to have 4 or 5 rehearsals. Then you're going to light it. Then you're going to shoot it. So, I mean, he'd say, you know, Tim, listen, I'm just going to say this. Just, you're going to wear yourself out. We're going to be doing 15 episodes. And if you start at the pitch you're starting at, you're going to wear yourself out by the end of the day. You won't have any energy left. So I just suggest wait until the camera goes, then let the real stuff come out. Just let's block it, you know, for the lighting and stuff. But the thing that caught me the most was the premiere episode of our show was coming up, and the LA Times did a cover of their TV guide section that had the Quest on the cover. And I thought, oh God, I heard we're going to get this. But it was a picture of Kurt on a horse alone. And I was nowhere near, I was not in the picture. And I got, you know, and I saw that on Sunday morning and I was like, geez, well, I know he's a bigger star, but it is a show about brothers. I mean, well, you know, what the heck, get over it, get over yourself. I get to work on Monday morning and I hear kind of a ruckus off in a certain part of the stage. And I walk back over to see what's going on. And Kurt was giving hell to the PR guy, he said, don't ever let that happen again. Don't do that to us. We are a team. If we're going to be on the cover of TV Guide, it's us or nobody. Don't ever do that again. And I was so moved and touched. I don't know another actor alive who would do that.
That's class. That's class.
Class act all the way. And always classy and always smart about his work. And you know, and advice about acting that I never would have gotten in acting class, because acting class is sort of the purest approach of, in the perfect world, you approach your character this way. And Kurt's was, after, you know, hundreds of thousands of hours on set, this is what works. Protect this, you know, take a nap at lunch. You know, you just make sure you get enough food. Otherwise, you're gonna get cranky, you know. But I learned a great deal from him, and he was an inspiration.
Now, of course, I have to ask you about Animal House. It's one of the 5 highest grossing comedy films in history. The Library of Congress selected Animal House for its National Film Registry as a rare work of cinema deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. How did an actor who had been basically typecast as a cowboy or a surfer manage to get cast as Otter?
I begged. I begged. They wouldn't let me in. I mean, I met him. I met the casting guy, Michael Chinich, and he just said, no, no, no. He introduced me to John Landis, and Landis said, no, no, no. He's a cowboy or a surfer. No, he's not. He's not preppy. And I'd never really done anything like that. I'd done no comedy, so it was no. They won't let me audition. And I had been taking improv classes because I wanted to break away from the straight and narrow parts that I had been playing and play something more dangerous and crazy. And so I begged a favor of a studio executive that I'd worked for the previous year. I said, just get me in the room. If I flame out in the room, I can live with it. But not getting in the room is just not. I feel like I've missed something here. And he says, I'll do my best. I'll see what I can do. So I get an audition. And I happen to go in, and they've really already cast the part. I forget the guy's name, but they had another actor they really wanted. And the studio wanted Chevy Chase. And I go in, and Peter Riegert and I, who ultimately he played Boone, we started riffing on the dialogue and improvising because he was an improv actor. And we started, playing. And I kept throwing in funny lines that I knew and he knew and that fit the scene. And we had Harold Ramis, John Landis, Doug Kenny, and Ivan Reitman just in stitches. And then they brought me back a week later to do it again, and again stitches. They're just falling up. And Landis takes me out. He said, "Go wait outside. You get in the hallway. Go on. We got to talk." And I hear laughing and yelling and inside. And Landis comes out and he goes, "We're going to hire you. You're going to be Otter. We love you. What you did. And but don't tell anyone about this until we call." And I said, "Okay, absolutely, yes." Of course, I immediately called my agent and said, "Don't tell anybody, but I think they're going to offer me this part." And
the on-screen chemistry between you, John Belushi, Bruce McGill. I know you've been asked a million times about working with John Belushi. You worked with him twice in Animal House, and then a few years later in Steven Spielberg's movie 1941. And in your book, you described Belushi during the Animal House days as gracious, approachable, genuinely friendly, quiet, thoughtful, and gentle. But you said he was walking on the edge all the time. What did you mean by that?
John was doing something new. He was approaching this not like a SNL sketch. And he was also doing SNL at the same time. So he would be with us in Eugene, Oregon, Monday, Tuesday, and half of Wednesday. And then they'd get him to the airport in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon, or Portland, I forget. And then they'd fly him to New York. So Thursday morning, he got to New York. And then he'd work with SNL Thursday, Friday, Saturday Night Live. And then they'd put him on a plane on Sunday, and they'd come back to us. And so he was challenged that way. He was doing 2 full-time jobs. But he was a different man than he was when he was on SNL. He was more real, more practiced, more contained. He was a big character, but he played it real. And that's why John Landis, the director, wanted actors like me and Peter Riegert and John Vernon around him. And we played it straight pretty much, because he wanted it grounded comedy. He didn't want an SNL sketch. They tried to put Chevy in it, and they tried to Landis and Ivan Reitman and the Lampoon publisher took him to lunch with Chevy and said, "We want you to do this movie. We really want you to, and Landis says, yeah. And you don't want to do a movie with Goldie Hawn where it's just you and Goldie up there all the time starring in a romantic comedy. You want to be in our gang comedy where you just want to 10 guys, and if now they're not going to be looking at you all the time. And it's, and I know there's no money in this, and they'll probably pay you $1 million, but you want to be in our movie." And they're kicking Landis under the table because he's talking Chevy out of being in Animal House, because he did not want it to be D-Day was written for Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis wanted to play Boone. And so it was meant to be all those people, but Landis smartly didn't want it to be a bunch of sketch actors doing, something not Caddyshack was good, but it was a different kind of comedy than Animal House. Animal House was very real.
Did you notice a significant change in John Belushi's personality and behavior between the first movie you made with him and the second?
Yes, I did. I mean, and sadly, what had happened was after the Animal House came out, it was the #1 movie in America. He and Danny Aykroyd created the Blues Brothers, and they had the #1 album in America. And SNL was the #1 TV show in America. And they were on tour as the Blues Brothers and just packing it in. And and I think I could be wrong maybe, but it just seems to me that there were more drugs in music than there were in the movies. And I just think that world kind of swallowed him up. And because when he was on 1941, he was still John Belushi, but you could just tell that there were a lot more miles on that car than, before. And he partied more, and it was hard. It had been hard for him. It was harder on him.
Well, you've known a number of celebrities over the years who've had a lot of trouble managing fame and the ups and downs of a show business career. Not only John Belushi, John Candy, Chris Farley, others. What do you think is the healthiest way for a big star to cope with being famous?
Do your work. Do the work. Just stick with the work. The work will save you and be your salvation. I mean, I did a series with Sam Kinison and called Charlie Hoover. I played a character named Charlie Hoover, and Sam was my internal id, who I was a milquetoasty kind of accountant, and people picked on me, and my wife picked on me, and I got no respect. And Sam was always there, and they shrank him to my shoulder so he'd appear, and he'd say, "Don't do that, come on," and he'd be that Sam Kinison character, which was huge. And I just felt if they had let Sam be full size, and only I could see him right in a room with everybody else in front of an audience, it would have been better for him, because Sam reminded me of Jackie Gleason with that kind of bombast and huge character. He could go big. He would get so upset and he would get so angry and funny, and he just didn't have a character that he could infuse it with, like Ralph Cramden in The Honeymooners, or Jackie Gleason did in Joe the Bartender, and Reggie Van Gleason, and all the different characters, or The Poor Soul, or all the different characters that he played on the Jackie Gleason show. Sam needed something like that. And I think that they all needed something like that, because, and as a movie star, you do a movie, then you sit for 3 months. You don't know what's next. So what do you do for 3 months? I have a drink, and, I have some food, just a party, I'm going to go. And then, the movie comes up. Okay, now I'll be clean, I'll be nice, and I do the movie. And then you sit for 5 months after the movie comes out. And it crashes. It doesn't work, say. So now what? And it's like, and your star is falling or rising. So, I mean, the stress of it, you can see it in sports. The fortunate thing about sports is you play every day, or you train every day. With acting, there's these big gaps in between. And unless you can really focus and practice your craft, can save you and your from your career in many ways. And I think mine always did, because when I would get off work, not that I was a saint, but when I was off work, I'd study, I'd research, I'd read, I would try something new. I'd take an improv class or whatever.
Yeah, what that tells me is that you really learned how to maintain a perspective about your life and your work. I only have one more Animal House question. There's this great seduction scene you have with Verna Bloom in Animal House. You said she was hoping for a little off-camera rehearsals of that love scene, and you said no. Has that happened often to you in your career, Tim?
A few times. Verna was a method actress, and like when in the scene where the toga scene, she actually had a sip or two before, because she was kind of tipsy, and she just felt, because De Niro said it. He said, I'll take a little sip, if just to get the slight feel of what it's like to be inebriated. But Verna was away from home, and here were all these kids running around, and it looked like a wild, crazy time. And I think she just wanted to join in, and I was honestly was on my best behavior, because Bruce McGill, who played D-Day, he had Party Central was his room. He and I pirated a piano and rolled it across the parking lot into his room. We found it in the lobby, an upright piano that nobody ever used. So we put it in his room, and every night there was a party in Bruce's room. And Lord knows everybody did everything in that room. It was all, but I never went there because I had more of the dialogue, and my character had a lot of text and things to do. So I was always home studying and not partying. So fortunately for me, that's what saved me while we were there. I never partied. I didn't go to the parties over there and do that stuff.
Well, you were a good boy. You were just a
Yeah,
good boy. Now, I also have to comment that you are, I am sure, the only male actor who ever got to cuddle up in bed on screen with Mel Brooks in To Be or Not to Be. Was that movie one of your favorite highlights of your career?
Oh, yeah. Yes. I mean, between working with, I guess, the godfather of comedy, Mel Brooks, who, as far as I'm concerned, made some, two of the most perfect movies that ever been made, Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles. And I think the queen of Broadway and Hollywood, Anne Bancroft, who was one of the most lovely, incredible women I've ever worked with. And I just, I had such a crush on her and just adored her. And I adored her talent and how generous she was with me, and just to be able to play a scene with her. But to work, I remember we did a scene where Mel's in the middle, and I think I'd just woken, he'd gotten into bed and realized it was not his wife, and it was me, and what am I doing here? And it was one of those scenes. It was like, what else are you with this and that? And there's three of us, and Ann and I are facing each other, and Mel's in the middle, and it's a 3-shot. And it was just, we did it in one take. And it was one of those things that was just like, it was like playing tennis at Wimbledon, because here you are between Mel and Ann, and it's just, that's why you rehearse. That's why that's why you rehearse a scene like that, because so you can do it at full speed with these two pros. She's an Oscar winner. He's certainly, I think he won an Oscar for the Critic, his documentary, his short film, his first short film, and he's a genius. And so I better have my stuff together to play opposite them, So
You did. You did. Now, of course, I have to ask you about The West Wing. You played Vice President John Hoynes. You were a very popular character. So I have to tell you, Tim, we were all shocked when your character was written out of the show after season 4. Do you know why they did that?
Well, I was sitting home waiting for the next episode to come and see what's going on with Hoynes. And I get the phone rings, and we have Aaron Sorkin and Tommy Shalami for you on the phone. I said, oh, okay. And I rarely got a phone call from either of them, let alone them together. So I knew something was up. And they go on to say hi. And Aaron says, we're leaving the show at the end of the season. And you are too. And I said, really? He said, it's a plot thing. What's going to happen is you're going to leave the show. The vice president has to resign in disgrace because of a former affair. And then Bartlett is going to have an MS episode and be incapacitated. And so the vice president should step in, but the Speaker of the House then is the next in line to the presidency. And that's a Republican played by John Goodman. So it's going to be a big drama in season 5. That's going to, so that's what's going to happen. And it kind of broke my heart, but I knew they were leaving, and I think the show changed when they left. And I came back a few times. I directed an episode. I directed Lawrence O'Donnell's last episode, the second to last episode of the series, the last episode that Lawrence wrote. And it was a different show, you know. It was a great show. I loved it. I mean, they were wonderful actors, Jimmy Smits and Alan Alda.
Well, we were all sad to see you go, I'll tell you. Now, over the years, you've played Ernest Hemingway, Howard Hughes, Emmett Dalton, JFK, President Reagan, and you even played Martha Stewart's ex-husband, Andy Stewart. What kind of research do you do when you're preparing to portray a real person?
Well, especially with Hemingway, with all of them, I read everything and anything I could about them and who they were, what they did, what they looked like. If I could get if I could listen to them, you could certainly with JFK, you could listen to them. But I fell into one big trap. When I did JFK, I spent a great deal of time, maybe too much time, thinking and working on his voice and his vocal pattern and his accent. And when I saw it, there were scenes that I didn't feel I tapped into the emotional core of the scene as much as I could have because I was working on the vocal, on something external. So that when I came to Reagan, I worked with Rod Lurie, the director and writer, and I said, I'm going to do a version of Ronald Reagan, and I'll honor his voice and his Midwestern accent, and you'll have to be responsible. If I miss it, I'll do it again. You tell me. I'm not going to think about it. Because to me, that movie is a love story between he and Nancy. And that's what we worked on. And that's what I worked on. And I didn't want to make the same mistake again that I did with JFK. And I felt it turned out much better. And the one thing I did that really helped me was I went horseback riding on the weekend because Reagan was a horseman. And he said, the best thing for the inside of a man is the outside of a horse. And so I just would go riding over the weekend and just let go of everything and just ride the horse.
You did a great job. I thought you were great with JFK too, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Now, I want to read you something, Tim, that you wrote about show business in your book. You said this: the entertainment industry is designed to keep you humble, and everyone is trying to get rid of you, replace you, forget you, or break you. So, Tim, given the longevity you've had in your career, you're the best person to ask this question. What would you say is the key to survival in this brutal industry?
I think it's true. I mean, I was sort of tongue in cheek that 24 hours a day everybody's trying to get you out of this business, and you've got to fight tooth and nail to hang in. But I think that what I did was just I was sort of bipolar. Half of me is an actor, and I'm studying my craft, and I'm studying my part, and I'm auditioning, but the other half is a business person that has to make sure you've got the best representation, the best agents, best lawyers, that you know what's going on in the business, what scripts are coming up. Oh, I want to get that. I want to, read ahead. You've got to know the lay of the land, and you have to be your own agent, and you have to be your own best manager. And I wouldn't trust it to anybody else. I had managers, and some were good and some weren't, but you've got to be the barometer and the compass for your own career, as well as the artistic side too. So to me, that's the sort of bifurcation that you need to survive, and it'll keep you more sane too.
Well, that's really about trusting your gut instincts, no matter what your managers or agents tell you, which must have been a difficult lesson to learn. But even when you follow your own instincts, there's no guarantee that you'll be right. If, for example, you turned down the Bruce Willis role in Moonlighting, you turned down MacGyver and Seventh Heaven, and all those shows were big hits. So when those things happen, does that make you question your own intuition?
Oh, yeah. Oh, certainly. And listen, every actor has 5 of those stories, as I've learned, and it's part of the deal. It's like Aaron Judge doesn't have a hit yet in the World Series, and he's Aaron Judge. I mean, my God. and Otani is not doing so well either. So it's like that can't break him or either of them. You're going to have your moments. With moonlighting, I had just finished a series with Kathy Hicks, Tucker's Witch, and I was exhausted. I mean, we were number 1 and 2, and we worked every day. We worked, 14 hours a day, and then you go home and you study 3 hours for the next day, and get 4 hours sleep, and you go to work and nap at lunch, and so it's exhausting. And so I came off of that, and like right away they said, "There's another script, you got to look at it. It's about a detective story, and it's this guy, and they banter, and I said, yeah, I just want to take a vacation. I just want to go away for 2 weeks and could take a boat ride, and float down a river, and
Well, you can't
stupidly
be blamed for that. You cannot be blamed for that. You have to have a life. Now, there's a fascinating chapter in your book about the ordeal you went through as a producer trying to make a TV sitcom called Just in Time and a movie called Blind Fury. And there's another chapter dealing with the hell you went through in 1989 after taking over the National Lampoon Company. I got the impression, Tim, that almost everybody you dealt with was unscrupulous, if not totally dishonest and corrupt. How can you tell who's honest and trustworthy in this business?
I think part of that was my innocence, and it came from me being a kid who avoided confrontation, who was a child of parent who drank, and I put up with people. I put up with people in my personal life and in my professional life who weren't perhaps rooting for me, and but I think the lesson I got from all of those things was it led me into directing. It led me into producing on my own. The Lampoon broke my heart because I just needed to raise $5 million and wanted to transplant it to Los Angeles, hire a bunch of young comedy people to do the magazine, and then to spin off TV and movie ideas from it, just like they had in New York with John Hughes and Michael O'Donoghue and all of the, P.J. O'Rourke and all the writers, Doug Kenny, all the writers that had originally been with the Lampoon. We wanted to recreate that again. But in both cases, with Blind Fury, a movie that I adapted from a Japanese movie called Zatoichi, and I bought those rights, and the Lampoon, I was partnered with somebody who was more competitive rather than a Kurt Russell. He wasn't a partner, he was sort of a competitor, and that did not serve us well, and that did not serve the venture well. And as soon as I realized that, and realized that the way this person was behaving, and the way that the person we were forced to merge with a guy who didn't really love the Lampoon like we did, and all he wanted to do was get rid of us and do what he wanted to do with the Lampoon. And as soon as we got that picture clear and I could get out, I just got out and went back to, I said, in Hollywood, people are better. These are crooks. They will stab you in the back, not because they gain anything out of it, just because they like doing that. I mean, that's what it seemed like to me. So I said, this business world is not for me. I'm having more fun in Hollywood, where at least they stab you in the chest. I mean, come on.
Well, you wrote that the biggest change you've seen in the industry in Hollywood since you started out as a kid is that the major decision makers have actually no experience making movies. They're financial people, they're not creative people. And yet, most of your colleagues who've been on our show are saying that we're living in a new golden age of television, thanks to all the new channels, the new streaming platforms. Do you agree with that we're in a new golden age of TV?
Well, we were, I think, and then Hollywood is dead still right now, and is going through a tremendous slowdown, and empty stages and empty lots, and a great number of people have gotten out of the business in the cast and the crews, because the work goes to Atlanta, it goes to Bulgaria, it goes to London, it goes to Vancouver, Toronto. And the governor announced yesterday, California, Governor Newsom, is doubling the size of the incentive program that's in California to compete with the incentives that are going on in other states and countries. I mean, and they're buying the business away from us, what they're doing, and they just give you more money. You want to make your show here? We'll give you twice as much money as they'll give you. And so and it's kind of stupid to turn it down, I guess, but it's a shame to me to see it going away, because the best technicians in the world are in Hollywood, and the best actors in the world used to be in Hollywood, and perhaps still are, but it's changing now, and there were a lot of shows, great shows being made, but now it's come to a standstill. We go out and try and pitch shows now. Nobody's buying anything,
and yet there's so much content out there. And I was thinking of Virgin River when you were talking. You made that for a streaming service, Netflix. Was there a big difference for you in making a show for Netflix versus a traditional TV network?
Yes. Traditional TV network is hands-on. They've got everything. And while you're shooting it, it's on the air, it's getting reviews and feedback, and it's a tangible process. Whereas when we did Virgin River, we shot 10 episodes in 2018, and within 3 weeks after getting done, we never knew, we hadn't seen it, nobody's seen anything of it, within 3 weeks after finishing the first season, they renewed it for season 2, and it was like, wow, I guess they know something, they like it. And then COVID hit, and season 3 was during COVID, and it's premiered during COVID, and now it becomes a hit. And at the end of season 3, on the last day of shooting, we were the #1 show in all of North America and in many, many countries all over the world. And it was like, we had no idea that the show was even working, let alone being that popular.
So working for Netflix is better than a network.
Oh, I think so. And they're not micromanaging it like the networks tend to, and watering it down. And I mean, I'm not backstage with the writers and see how that all works, but I think they're very supportive of what the creative staff wants to do. They give notes, and they have certain things they want to have happen. But I think it's a good thing the streamers are here. I think it's great. I do wish that more was made in Hollywood, and I wish that we could get these labor troubles behind us and get our feet on the ground again.
I hope it happens. Well, Tim, I have only one more question for you, and it's this. You said very candidly in your book that you eventually discovered that you had a serious personality flaw, that you do everything to avoid confrontation. You're a peacemaker. So my question is this. How did you learn to overcome that issue and become more assertive?
I was in therapy, and I took a great deal of therapy, and that helped. And then I just started standing up for myself, and I would just question relationships and saying, is this serving me well? Or is this not serving me well? And the minute I decided it wasn't serving me well, I broke it off. And even some childhood friends and sort of maybe short-term romantic relationships, and in one case, my second marriage. So those are things that I grew into, protecting myself, saying, is this a plus or a minus? Right? Is this somebody that's rooting for me or not? And if they fell on the not side, okay, let's leave it. But I know that there was an old childhood friend of mine that I'd always been around him, since we were 10. And I saw him like over the last about 5-6 years ago. And both my sister and my then girlfriend, but now wife, said, he's not nice to you. He's always digging at you, man. What do you put up with that? And it was like,
Had you never noticed that before?
I had, but it was family. It was like he was my brother. It was in a way, and so you kind of, and that was the way I treated my family. You know, I mean, that was sort of the thing that was wrong with me and my family. And that was one of the last ones that I let go of, you know, in that regard. It's easier with somebody you meet new and or you're in business with, or, you know, it's like, I'm not getting I trust my gut now. I just trust my gut. If it doesn't feel right, I'm done.
So you mentioned therapy. Was writing the book therapeutic for you?
Oh, God, yes. Oh, yes. Because you have to sit and look at all the silly things that you did. And oh my God, I can't believe I said that to TV Guide. Oh my God, what was I thinking? I mean, yes. And it's humbling. And it also, I was proud of certain things, but I
Well,
also
what you
wanted
said to TV Guide was actually right. It
well,
didn't please Michael Landon, but let's be honest, you were right.
yes, no, I was right. I was right, but I perhaps could have chosen a better venue to mention it in instead of an article about Bonanza, you know, that, and I hadn't even been on the show yet. I mean, the show wasn't even on the air yet. I'd been on the show like 2 or 3 weeks, so they didn't know who I was.
So
And
when you wrote these things about your life in your book, was it therapeutic because you found a way to forgive yourself?
yes, now, you know, Harvey, absolutely, you're absolutely right. Because I think once you acknowledge it and you can admit that I was stupid when I did this, I was, you know, when I cheated on my first wife, I was a bastard. That was immoral. That was just terrible. It was a terrible person who did that. And I learned from that. And when you're recounting those things, you're owning them and you can forgive yourself. And I think that's the healthy process, you know. And you're absolutely right. I think it was very therapeutic. And you remember 101 things that happened that, oh my God, then that, oh, and then that, you know, it all comes back to you. And it's like it was a great refresher course.
Well, I got to tell you, Tim, it's been such a pleasure meeting you. I've always been impressed with you as an actor, but the fact that you're willing to open up your heart to the public the way you did in the book and the way you have in this interview, this speaks volumes about who you are. You're a really wonderful guy. Thank you so much for all the great performances. Thank you for writing the book. And most of all, thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
Harvey, thank you so much. I greatly enjoyed speaking with you, and I had a ball.
Well, you are welcome back anytime. Our guest has been the highly acclaimed actor, director, producer, and author, Tim Matheson, whose new book, Damn Glad to Meet You, My 7 Decades in the Hollywood Trenches, is now available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks, Harvey.
Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli at the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.